Hey guys, I'm Raul Morales and I'm a buyer's representative and founder of My Casa Realty. And today I have here Charlie Flaherty. And Charlie is the owner and operator of one of the most prestigious design and construction firms in Tulum. Thank you so much for coming on, Charlie.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and as always, after all these years, to see you again, and I look forward to meeting your clients.
Yeah, thank you. So Charlie, tell us a little bit about where you're from, how you got started in the construction business, and what you're doing in Tulum.
I grew up in Central Ohio, and my father was a builder, a commercial builder, and so I spent years, I should say summers, and on my spring breaks, working for him to put money together, and kind of fell in love with the industry. There were things that I didn't like about it and things that I absolutely loved about it. So I progressed, ended up working in Southern California building homes and building some really spectacular homes. Finally, one of my clients offered me an opportunity to come down here and build in Tulum, which I had no idea what it was whatsoever. Showed up in a suit and tie because I thought that was appropriate. I was sweating for about 4 months before I actually figured out how to kind of acclimate a bit. During that project, I fell in love with what is the process here. It's a lot more complex, a lot more dynamic, it requires a lot more of you, but said this is where I want to be, and I love it. I love Tulum, and I love even how it's being developed.
So I'm a big fan of your work, especially the Sukha development and how you merged the trees and nature with the construction. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I'm glad you like it. Sukha was a labor of love. And we had a great team, including, of course, all of the developers, because they were extremely involved in all the decisions. They had a very high criteria of what they were looking for, but they also really wanted to make the impact on the environment as little as possible. So I worked with the architects, worked with the engineers. Everybody worked together to do something that was a big challenge, probably one of the biggest challenges we've had, but the product turned out to be something that I think that probably more so than any other project around has really real integrity.
I love your work as well, and I know you don't just do developments, you do individual homes as well. And I think a lot of my clients that come to me, they ask me, Raul, how difficult is it to construct your own home in Tulum? What would you tell them?
What I would tell anybody who showed any amount of interest would start with the steps. There's some obvious steps that you need to take. Obviously, if you take your first step wrong, you're going to be trying to catch your balance the rest of the journey. So you start with somebody who not only knows the lay of the land, but has experience. His experience is important. So if, again, of course, we always defer to you, Raul. Having a buyer's rep that really knows, that has experience, that knows how things work, that not only has done the research on the properties that are available, but also the reputation of the developers and different members of a team, because it will be a team that's going to put together an entire project, and has done that research and has done that research over a period of time. So start off on the right foot. That is absolutely essential. From that point on, you need to make sure that all the decisions you make are in that same line. You want to make sure that you have, that your team is a team that is well integrated. That they have the integrity, that they have the experience, because of course knowing something, what the book says, you should do this, and this, versus having the flexibility to adapt to situations as they arise, because in any circumstance, in any part of the world, projects are complicated. So those first steps, your team is essential. From that point on, making sure that every step of the way that you're involved, that you know what's going on. The question as to whether or not, whether it's more difficult or less difficult than other parts of the world, I built quite a bit in all over North America. And certainly there were places that were more difficult because of strict policies of, protecting the environment or different facades, so on and so forth. I don't think it's particularly different here. There are different elements. I mean, you need to really know what the principles of the process, construction materials, the labor, the workforce, and there's a lot of different things that you need to consider, as well as permitting process and so on and so forth. But again, when you have a team that has experience, they'll be able to walk you through, so it's absolutely clear what the processes are. And that eliminates this feeling of feeling lost or not having the proper communication, because if you know what's going on, then even something that seems overwhelming at day one, you take it step by step by step, and it's just like any process anywhere.
My mom actually had a very cute saying, and she would tell me, yard by yard, it's very hard, inch by inch, it's a cinch.
I like it.
Yeah, and it's actually by Puss in Boots. Yeah.
Very wise sage. Puss in Boots.
Yeah, more than what we think. But I think some of my clients, they actually ask me, like, how much of a headache is it? Is there any way for them just to purchase it, be involved from far away, and have somebody like you take care of all the heavy lifting and everything else? Or how hands-on do you think they have to be?
That's a great question. I think that range of comfort, everybody's going to have their own range of comfort. That's also why it's really important to have somebody or a team that knows and can adjust to what you need. Because if, the majority of our clients are actually, whether they're in South America, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, we have lots of clients in Europe, Germany, Switzerland, and of course quite a bit in the United States and Canada. Most of them aren't here at all. Oftentimes there's some people say, listen, we don't even know what we want, and you solve it, just let us know, keep us informed. So it kind of depends upon each person, but communication, as in every circumstance, is absolutely essential. And so thankfully with the technologies we have today, to be able to communicate, actually draw online, show renders, they can almost put their hands on things, and pictures of progress, take the time to really communicate well. I think that's absolutely essential. And then, the clients are going to they'll make their own decisions. Say, you know what, that's enough information for me. And I have clients when they ask me about wastewater treatment, which is one of my topics that I think is very, very important here. And I go into more detail than they generally want to hear. But I would rather them say, all right, too much than not enough, because I think that's obviously the owners are an essential part to this component of collaboration. And so we get to where they want, they invest what they want to invest in terms of money, time, and then the outcome is exactly what they're looking for.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And just to set a very particular example, I want to build in Tulum, and I'd like to build a house for my family, a 4-bedroom in La Valletta. I'm looking at some different sizes of lands. What would be on the time and the cost on something like that?
Of course, there's tons of variables, but that's why I'm going to give you a range, talking about time for a house that size. I think that you want to dedicate at least 3 to 6 months in what we would call the pre-construction phase. That's the time you take to design it, because obviously it's going to be your home and it needs to reflect the way that you want to live, the way that you want your family to grow up, the environment that you want to be. Do you want to be able to walk to a park? Do you want to be able to walk to the beach? All those different things. And when you get back from the beach, do you walk in the house barefoot? I mean, all those different things. It takes time to really flesh out those details, so to make sure that you get the house that you want to live in, that's going to create the context of the story that you want to make of your life. So I think that's an essential period of time to take that 3 to 6 months to make those decisions. Then at that point the construction starts, and on a house of the size that I think you're talking, I think that you would consider somewhere between 8 to 12 months, just depending upon detail. Obviously if it's a minimalistic house, it's simple details, so on and so forth, I suppose that minimalistic house, it's going to be on the lower range because it's easier to do these things. Whether if there's fluted details and so on and so forth, things that are a bit more complicated, then you're going to, it's going to take a bit more time. Obviously, using materials that are here or finishes that are here, all those elements, that makes life a lot easier, because you can, at times you say, okay, it's time to buy the sink. Well, you want to make sure that you're purchasing the sink 4 months before you actually need it on site, just in case there's the delay, things like that. Whereas if it comes, from Japan, then that can be a bit more complicated because you're dealing with other factors. But that's what we really mean. We generally go between that time period on a house that size. Another aspect that I think is very important about, of course, time is always money. And so another element of that people want to understand a range of is the cost, and cost somewhere between, we talk about square meters, square feet here, to have a range somewhere between, I would say, about $85 per square foot up to about $100 per square foot that's where I would say the range has been over the past 5 years or so. $100 a square foot at that time being really, really high-end finishes. Now it's starting to shift a little bit, not necessarily because prices are going up, as they always do, but it's more that the expectation of the market. If you're building a home for yourself, or if you're building a home that's going to be an investment home that you're going to rent out, the people who are renting here are more sophisticated now. They want better finishes. They want an experience that's more tactile, that feels more authentic, more Tulum, and that obviously takes it brings us up. So if you would think of a range somewhere between that that $85 a square foot range up to 105, 110, but there's certainly still a really good sweet spot around $100 a square foot to have a really nice home, really a home that's gonna last. And the construction that's done here, it's all concrete and rebar and steel, and it's very resistant type of construction. So that's construction cost. That cost can sometimes be proposed to. Sorry, I'm going to start over again. So that's construction cost. There's also the design cost that needs to be taken into account, because oftentimes when people say, "Oh, what's the cost of construction?" they say that, but they don't incorporate the other part, the other essentials. And I think that's an error. I think it's important when somebody wants to know the whole story that they get the whole picture, because again, it's an environment that many people have never built in before, and so I'd rather too much information than not enough. To have the construction or the design cost, thinking of everything, the engineering, all the on-site stuff, the architecture, everything that needs to be done to create that project, so that you decided what you're going to build, and then you build it. You make your mistakes on paper, and you make your changes on paper as opposed to going to concrete, because when you make changes in concrete, it's a whole lot more expensive. So taking that time to design and spending somewhere about, if you take your overall price and you apply, for instance, somewhere between 3 to 7% of that cost, that's what you should consider dedicating to the design. May seem like a lot of money, but if you decide what you want before you start, then the project moves slowly. If you design, the design phase moves slowly if you're making the decisions now, but construction is fluid with the least amount of changes. In fact, if it's done perfectly, the only changes that come up are changes that you say, I'd rather that was red as opposed to green, or whatever the case may be. And it's going to be more effective cost for you, and it's going to require less of your time, as an owner. Whereas if you say, all right, let's do a design quick and let's get started, it can be done that way, but your involvement during the process, the decisions and the unknowns are the things that create stress. And what our objective is to have the process be as fluid as possible. I mean, I always make the joke that we want our clients to forget about us as soon as possible. I want the process to be so good that they'd be like, wow, this was great, and they are just living in their house. They're not sitting there thinking, God, that was could have been better. Or, no, we really want it to be an experience that is just so flawless that they're just in their home. They're just in a new place, and they're not thinking about us. That would be the best way for them. When somebody says, "Hey, what was your experience?" It was great. And that would be the best way that this process moves forward.
So it sounds like slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Most definitely.
Charlie, can you take us through what the typical steps would be for design and construction with you?
Sure. Typical steps for design and construction. First things first, the client. Find out exactly what we need. We call it the architectural brief. That's not something that's what it's generally called. This architectural brief is just an interview to get an overall sense of these elements, things that you liked in projects you've seen before, or things that you've dreamt of, or things that you absolutely didn't like. And we start to, hodgepodge without necessarily they call it a brainstorming, or lluvia de ideas here in Mexico. And so just put everything together, images that you've seen, all this, really start loading up all this information. It's then the job of the architect to go out, look at the lot, look at the property, do the investigation about what the laws say about that particular property, and start trying to formulate something that resembles that inspiration, but also is inside the budget, because everybody has a budget. Everybody wants a budget to be respected, and so just saying, okay, well, we can do this, we can't do this, or we can do this in this way, and so that the second stage, or I would say kind of like the third stage, we've already had the interview, we've already seen the site, we know what the regulations are. Then you're going to go out and they're going to start putting together a massing. And it's just like, this is the logical. Your kitchen is next to your living room, and you want the kids to be able to, where the pool is, you want to be able to look out and see the pool. And so you're just organizing, in a sense, the spaces, almost in blocks. And then you start going into more detail and you start drawing in walls and ones. So that's the general process early on. Then you're going to jump into engineering. While the engineering is going on the other side, you'll be working with the architects to define all the finishes, carpentry, closets, fixtures that you want to see, the switches on the wall, absolutely define absolutely everything. And once we have all that definition done, on this side, the engineering will have been completed. And at that point, we can go in and do an itemized budget, which we think should be part of every development. Because when you do a design, you say, oh, if I got a great idea and I'm just really excited about this, and you get it, and then you see the price, and you're like, well, I can't build that. That's not in the budget that I want to spend. And so that's why our process is a bit different. And we want to be able to say, okay, this is what we designed, and this is exactly the cost. So if you wanted to take that, go somewhere else and shop that with other builders, you would have the opportunity to do that, because we really want to make sure that the relationship we developed early on in design, that confidence is sustained throughout the entire project. Because they can be complicated and there's changes and so on and so forth. So if we've started off, again, like I said earlier, on a good foot, then we stay that way. And I know partially that's why you're here talking to me today, because over years and years and years, we've had this relationship, and you know that you can count on us to follow through. And of course, that's why we're happy that you're here and continue to develop this relationship. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming on. From that point, once we have the budget done, permitting is kind of overlaps with that a little bit, and then construction. The construction cost is just like, or the construction process is just about like any other. Excavation, walls, floors, ceilings, that whole, and then get into finishes. But really during that process, we have clients that never come down. They never see the project other than in pictures. And others that are here, they're on the job site every day. We actually had one client that in his contract he wanted to say, I want to carry all the blocks. So he was the guy that would carry the blocks from the truck to where they needed to be. And that was his level of involvement and supervision that he wanted. I mean, he wanted to be in part of the crew, and that literally happened. I mean, it was amazing. But again, everybody has their own possibilities. I mean, if they're still working and you're still working, I'm sure you're not going to be on a job site every day, but you still are going to want all the information. How are things going? Are there any changes? Anything I need to have be up about? But that's the process of the construction. It's very, very similar to what you would experience. Simply the materials are different, and so that makes it a bit different than other parts in the world. But fundamentally, that's the way construction goes.
When's the first payment?
Well, if you're ready to sign now, we can. The way that we develop is a bit different than others. Unless there is a reason to do a large, down payment. For instance, let's say steel prices are fluctuating or something like that. It might be good to go and anchor in a large payment early on. But that's something we would discuss with you prior to.
What's the first payment to you as far as design? Is there a first payment to you for design?
Our payment structure in terms of the design and construction are different. We treat those two different. They're different contracts for us. We have many people that want to contract the two together because that's more conventional here in Mexico, not so much in the United States. There's an architect, and then after there's an architect, there's contractors. So what we do is we create a cash flow based upon how we intend to use the money and the range, so that we're never 5 steps ahead of you in terms of you've given us all this money and we haven't given you back any of the deliverables, any of the process yet. So we really want to go step by step by step in that design phase. And so that percentage that I was mentioning about the development cost, that's pretty much it just slowly increments over that period of time, and it's based upon the time period. You say, listen, this is going to take 3 months. and I want it to take 3 months, but then it extends to 4 months, well, then that payment schedule extends, obviously, because in a sense, all of them are, when we give you, what we call them deliverables, I give you over one aspect of the package, then we've made a certain amount of advance, and that's the way we go, to make sure that again, that confidence, that understanding, the clarity of our process is really, really important, not just so that you know where we are in the process, but you understand, you know, what the time frame, what the advance is, and so on and so forth. Construction, we do similar. That's again, like I said, it's a different contract, but from here we start and we base it upon the expenses that we know that we're going to have, and we've been doing this for 17 years here, and so I have no idea how many projects we've done at this point. I should probably count it at some point, but the process, even if it's a home or it's a large building, the way you end up using materials and that flow in terms of manpower and so on and so forth, it's very scalable. And so those same controls we use for one project or the other, even if it's a very big project, doing big projects that are over 3 or 4 year projects, that's a big project. But the same amount of controls you need to have in place, controls for cost, controls for time, so on and so forth, for a project that's going to be 6 months. I mean, that's really, and you have to apply the same discipline to be able to make sure that all those things pan out the way that you plan them to. Our payment plans are pretty simple. I mean, a payment plan like you might see in any other circumstance. We start off with a small fee just to get things rolling, and then we create a cash flow that says, you know, how we anticipate that our progress over the period of time that we sent for the design phase. And as we reach those different goals, those payments come in, and so it's very straightforward. Our cost structure on a construction contract is very, very, very similar. We don't require large down payments, and as we make progress, you'll see where we should be. You'll see advancing. You'll see pictures. You'll see everything, so that everything coincides with this idea again that it's transparency, and there's not a point where either I've got a lot of your money and haven't given you much back, nor where I'm ahead of you and we haven't gotten the money yet. The idea is that it's a collaboration. This is a team, and we're going to move through this together.
Thank you so much for clearing that up for us, Charlie. And also, what are some of the other most frequently asked questions that you get?
Frequently asked questions, honestly, you've asked quite a few of them. Most people are concerned with those elements. They're concerned with time. They're concerned with how different the process is from what they were accustomed to. And of course, concerned with money. And I think the main thing is, you know, people all over the world, not here in Mexico only, in the United States, they've heard horror stories. They've heard, you know, things that have gone wrong, and say, well, you know, does this happen? Does that happen? So on and so forth. And since I've had the opportunity to work in many different places, it gives me a perspective that I think is different, because I don't see things here being that different than they were elsewhere. It just requires a bit more involvement, a bit more experience, a bit more flexibility. But again, all of that is part of the team that you put together. I can't honestly think of another frequently asked question that you haven't touched on.
Great. So Charlie, what are your favorite things about living in Tulum?
My favorite things about living in Tulum have changed over time. When I first came down, I was all about the ocean. I was at the ocean all the time. And I had friends that would say, hey, you need to come see the jungle. And I was like, it sounds hot and buggy and sticky. No, I have no interest. I'm happy here on the beach. Then I saw the jungle. And so for the past 12 years, I've been living in the jungle, and I love it. And so I think that, strangely enough, that I've shifted. I go to the beach quite a bit less than I do the jungle. And now that there's so many interesting things that are being developed and experiences that are here, I don't even get enough time to do them all. So it's changing. It's changed a lot. But right now, I'd say my number one is being out in the jungle, being out in the nature. I love it. I absolutely love it.
So Charlie, what's your favorite type of construction for you to do? I mean, is there something that really gets your creative juices going?
I don't think that I have a particular style of construction that excites me more than others. I think it's simply the challenge, because again, like we talked earlier about Sukkah. Sukkah was a real challenge. The design isn't extremely complicated. It was so many different elements, and one of the things that I love about being here, and one of the reasons I didn't go back to doing what I did in the States, is because every day here is a different challenge. I mean, literally I drive around with different wardrobe in my truck because I might be on the site one day, I might be in a jungle one day, I might need a machete one day, I might need a suit the next day. Actually, I don't even have a suit anymore. That part's a lie. I don't have a suit. But all these different changes, and it's more about that experience and the experience of collaborating with so many different people, being involved with the biologists that are doing the studies, being involved with the federal government and making decisions about permits and designing inside those contexts. Obviously, all the elements and the carpentry details, the materials that are here, looking for the best workers that really know how to use the tools. I mean, we get involved with everything. Where in the States, it was like everybody had their own job, whereas here, you really get to become integrated with the team, and I think that collaboration is the thing that the type of construction that I like the most. Not necessarily in style, but the actual doing it.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for sharing your time with me and my clients and answering all these questions. And I know we really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the time with you always. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to meeting your clients.
Buddy, take it easy. Thanks.